So we now continue and go ahead with the video demonstration of back anatomy by Dr. Rakhi More.
So we are going to see the video of the dissection of the back. We've already seen the theoretical part. This is the dissected back. The two muscles which we see in the superficial compartment are the trapezius. We can see this is the trapezius muscle. It forms a trapezoid shape when the muscles of the two sides are seen together. Extends right from the external occipital protuberance to the superior nuchal line. Takes origin from the ligamentum nuchae and the thoracic spines till T12. It gets inserted into the superior border of the spine of the scapula, medial border of the acromion process, and posterior border of the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle. So this muscle which we see over here is the trapezius. Inferiorly we see the latissimus dorsi. We will focus on the superior aspect now. After reflecting the trapezius, the muscles which we see on the medial aspect attached to the medial border of the scapula will be the rhomboides major, the rhomboides minor, and the levator scapulae. Once we reflect these muscles, we see this aspect of the muscle of the posterior compartment, that is the serratus posterior superior. If we come superiorly, we see the semispinalis capitis muscle and the semispinalis cervicis. Okay, so in the first video, we have seen the upper back muscles which showed the trapezius. On reflecting the trapezius, we saw the muscles on the medial aspect of the medial border of the scapula, that is the rhomboid major, minor, and the levator scapulae. On reflecting the rhomboids, we saw the serratus posterior superior muscle. Now in this video, we will see the inferior muscle or the latissimus dorsi. I'm starting the video now, so you can see the video and then we can discuss about the muscles on the posterior, on the lower aspect. The muscles of the inferior aspect of the posterior compartment. This big muscle which we see is the latissimus dorsi. You can see the wide origin of the muscle. It goes laterally and gets inserted into the upper limb. Reflect the latissimus dorsi. This muscle which we see over here in the middle compartment is the serratus posterior inferior muscle. So this is the serratus posterior inferior. Reflect the serratus posterior inferior, we come to the deeper compartment. This is the erector spinae muscle. Now the erector spinae muscle is present in three groups. This is the midline, so this is the spine. So the muscle which is related to the spine is the spinalis. Laterally will be the longissimus and lateral most will be the iliocostalis. So these are the parts of the erector spinae muscle which run right from the sacrum to the skull. The muscle takes origin in form of a Okay, as you can see in this image, the important muscle over here is the erector spinae muscle, and we have already seen in the theory the three parts of the erector spinae muscle. The medial most part is the spinalis. As you can see, it is related to the spine. This is the spine and this is the spinalis. The intermediate part is the longissimus, and the lateral part which is related to the ribs is called as the iliocostalis. So these are the three parts of the erector spinae muscle which can be properly seen. The three parts can be properly seen during dissection. And the muscle takes origin in the form of from the sacrum, but as you go higher up, the fibers relay. So the fibers will get inserted at the level of the rib, and then the next fiber will take origin from there on the medial aspect of the inserted fiber. So likewise, these fibers go right up to the skull. Okay. So that is the next video. We'll come to the third video. Yeah.
These three components of the erector spinae can be seen very well on. Am I on? The spinalis longissimus and iliocostalis are seen very well on ultrasound. You can see them, and in fact many times you can see LTRs in these muscles as well. The spinalis is the one which is obviously most affected in these in most pathologies, whether it is back problem or many pains which are referred to the back, like visceral pains, like pancreatitis pain will be reflected or rather referred to the spinalis and also to the longissimus and the iliocostalis. And of course it will also be there in the front of the abdomen. But interestingly, in pancreatic pains, be it from pancreatitis or be it from pancreatic cancer, the pains seem to be maximum over the around the thoracolumbar junction in the erector spinae muscles. And just after 3-4 sessions of needling, these pains come down almost by 40-50%, which is amazing in these patients because they are on opioids, still they are having so much pain, but once the needles come in, these pains become so much less for them. And again here in some of these patients, I have treated them with Botox, so that Botox gives us 6 months of peace, and many of these patients may have only so much life. So it becomes a good life for them to do this. So these are very important muscles for visceral pains, for back pains, and interestingly even for interstitial bowel disease. Like it's such a IBS is such a common problem, and many patients who have had IBS in addition to whatever other problem they had, I simply address these muscles as well in IBS, and they recover. They say my IBS is a lot better, so they are very happy. So these back muscles play a role in many problems. Back pain though 100% they are there. I mean mechanical, of course tomorrow you will see all of them will talk about the erector spinae muscle in every condition of back pain. Mechanical back pain, of course, I will be mentioning these. I think that's.
Yeah. So we go to the last video now of
Placed
the
in
back.
3 groups. The one in the center will be the spinalis, the intermediate one will be the longissimus, and the lateral most one be the iliocostalis. The fibers of the erector spinae muscle take origin and insertion in the form of a relay. So the fibers will take origin at the inferior level, then they will end at the superior level. The next group of fibers will again take origin at the next higher level. So this is how the erector spinae muscle covers up the whole spine right from the sacrum to the skull. Once we reflect the erector spinae, we go to the deeper group of muscles, that is the intertransverse or the interspinal muscles. So these muscles are placed between the spines and the transverse processes. So they are placed in between these two bony points, and they form the deepest layer of muscle of the back.
हाँ चालू कर. So in this dissection, as I have already said, it is very difficult to demonstrate the layers the multifidus and the rotators. So what we are seeing over here on the medial aspect, we can see the spine. So this will be the spine, and on the lateral aspect is the transverse process. So the muscles in between them, from superficial to deep, will be the semispinalis, then the multifidus, and then the rotators. And between the two transverse processes will be the intertransverse area, and in between the two spinous processes will be the interspinous muscles. Interspinous muscles. The deeper dissection is really not possible. Means the layer-wise dissection is not possible in an embalmed cadaver. Okay, so these are the videos on the back. I thank the Dean of Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Navi Mumbai, Dr. Surekha Patil ma'am, and the HOD of the anatomy department over there, who really helped us in the dissection, providing us with the cadaver, and Dr. Rishi Kumar and Dr. Keshvi, who helped me with the dissection and the video recording. So their role was very important in the video demonstration, because earlier we have been doing live dissections and live demonstrations. So this time it was different for us also. Thank you. So we will now go to the next video, that is the video of the lower limb.
We have few questions. There's one question by Dr. Sushma Phanse. What are the muscles to be needled in plantar fasciitis?
In plantar fasciitis, you can take it as an extension of calcaneal spur pain. Here I want to mention one thing. Calcaneal spur is an incidental finding which you will find in many patients. It is not necessarily.
You have to look at the camera.
It is not necessarily a spur caused because of the pain. A spur is caused because the tendo-Achilles is a powerful tendon which is keeping on pulling on the calcaneus from the time of 1 year infant, when you were a 1 year infant, when you started walking and running and whatnots. And over the years, the spur develops. So the presence of the spur is not an indication that it is pathological. It's an incidental finding. However, the pain is because of the calcaneal spur, and where the calcaneal insertion ends, the plantar fascia starts, and it goes across the foot. Am I right, Raki?
Yeah.
So when you want to treat plantar fasciitis, you have to treat the soleus and the gastrocnemius and the tendo-Achilles, and then you have to treat the muscles of the foot. Anyway, the plantar fascia is most superficial. So when you try to do the needling of the foot muscles, automatically the fascia also gets needled. And here you have to understand, there is a lot of evidence coming in now that many pains are because of the facial layers rather than the muscles. However, this is a very difficult question to solve, whether the pain is coming from the fascia or from the muscle, because it's like the chicken and egg situation. When you needle the fascia, automatically muscles also get needled. So when you are doing the foot needling, automatically the fascia plantar fascia gets needled, and once you do the needling, things improve a lot for these patients. But having said that, I want to tell you that plantar fasciitis is one of the very painful conditions, and when pain stays for a while, the area becomes severely hyperesthetic. Doing needling for plantar fasciitis on the foot is one of the tortures you can inflict on somebody. See, in our clinic, we always do all these patients with Prilox application, whether it is the foot or hand or head or neck or back. The first thing the patient gets is a Prilox administration, and then only we do. And we usually do ultrasound of the Prilox. Here I mean the physiotherapy ultrasound. We apply the Prilox and then do ultrasound on it so that it penetrates through the epidermis to the dermis quickly. and then we do the needling, and that makes it kinder. And in addition, we also give them analgesics. Our analgesic may be piroxicam, it might be aceclofenac, or it might be Dolo 650, whichever the patient wants. But by ourselves, we usually give either aceclofenac or we give Dolonex DT, that is piroxicam. And in spite of it, the foot needling would be very difficult in plantar fasciitis. So probably the first 1 or 2 sessions, it might be kinder to do it under a tibial nerve block. Tibial nerve block above the ankle, so that the patient is comfortable, and then you do the needling. Or alternatively, when you do the tibial nerve block, just do a little bit of trigger injections in the foot, and then rest of this takes away the hyperesthesia and hyperalgesia in the foot, and then we can do needling. So this is to make it kinder to the patient. Does that answer your question, Sushma? You have to do the gastrocnemius and soleus as well as the foot muscles. Which foot muscle? It does not really matter here, because it is the plantar fascia which is causing the problem, which is most superficial. I would imagine it would be more of the flexor group. Flexor group would be the second layer. Second layer. So the short flexors as well as the long flexors. And when you do the needling of the calf, you would have looked at the digitorum and the flexor hallucis. Flexor hallucis, which comes from the fibula laterally, and the flexor digitorum, which comes from the tibia medially. This is something you have to remember and needle, because if the pain is more in the hallucis, that is the thumb, then you have to go more laterally for the needling in the leg.
What symptoms of IBS are relieved with dry needling of the erector spinae muscle?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I forget that. See, the IBS, I have a very vague theory about IBS. I do not know how far it is correct. I am looking at IBS as the innervation of the gut. The sympathetic innervation of the gut comes from the somatic segments of T5 to T10, T11, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I start my needling from somewhere around T4 and go down right up to the sacrum. And I believe the sympathetic innervation, which is probably, see, the vagus is the something which slows down the gut, whereas the sympathetic is the one which hastens the gut. So I believe that these needles are sort of modifying the sympathetic influence probably, and so which symptom gets relieved will be probably the frequency and diarrhea kind of a thing that they have will come down. IBS patients have alternating diarrhea with constipation, and this seems to reduce. The diarrheas seem to reduce, and somehow the constipation also seems to reduce. Why, how, what, I do not know. They just tell me that they are better, because they themselves are so vague about their symptoms. Their thing is, I'm forever running to the toilet, and I feel as if I have to run to the toilet and things like that. These are the symptoms of IBS that they have. So these symptoms seem to come down. They can sit for long periods in peace, and their internal, the discomfort that they have in the stomach, in the abdomen comes down. This is what my patients have told me. And having got the result, this is the way I have reasoned it out in my own head as to why it is working. This is all research project for all the youngsters. Somebody who sees IBS in a big way, they can do research into this.
So Lakshmi, you're saying you're needling from T4 to T12 level, is it? That's what you're saying.
T4 to T12 is essential, but as Raki has emphasized repeatedly, the erector spinae is something which goes from the sacrum to the sacrospinalis. So my focus will be between T4 and T12, but I will put a few needles, some distant needles I can put right up to the sacrum, and if I want to, I'll go up to the head also. The focus will be
How
there.
many patients have you treated of IBS like that?
See, I
Because
have
it's the first time I'm hearing about this kind of thing.
one of the things about IBS is patients have not been referred to me for IBS. When they have come for other problems, we have treated the IBS. Probably about 10-15 patients. I have not really, isolated these cases and then studied them. This is an incidental finding because they didn't come to me for IBS. They have come more for other problems, maybe backache, maybe fibromyalgia, maybe some CRPS somewhere else, but they also have IBS. So, in addition to whatever their problem was, I treated IBS.
Endometriosis patients have IBS,
Who?
Endometriosis patient, they can also have IBS,
Oh yes,
so
yes,
that will be
yes,
beneficial in this.
yes. Some of the endometriosis patients also we have treated because endometriosis responds beautifully to needling, by the way. And in endometriosis, this is the sole treatment needed actually. You don't really need anything else. We have several patients of endometriosis who have done so well that they have forgotten they had endometriosis.
Needling of what for endometriosis? Which area? Sorry to divert.
So, no. Endometriosis is, as the name suggests, it is endometrial deposits wherever, whenever in the pelvic peritoneum and other areas. So, these pains are referred mainly to the buttocks, the inner thigh, the adductor muscles, and glutei, piriformis, gemelli are some of the most affected in these patients, and also the back. The whole thing, multifidus and the spinalis and all the three components of the erector spinae and psoas. But if the patient has an endometrial deposit somewhere high up in the peritoneum, then it will go higher also. The pain will go higher. So it is like wherever the pain, you look at the pain diagram of the patient and put needles along the pain diagram. But focus more on the buttocks, inner thigh, and even some of them have pains right up to the calf and other things. But again, very rewarding because these are women who suffer a lot and they have no answers. They are on hormone therapy with no use. There's many of them have had endoscopic surgeries. Still, the endometriosis is controlled, but the pain from the endometriosis, which has been set in motion long before this treatment, continues. This is the Swayambhu status of these MTRPs. The problem of endometriosis is gone in these patients, in many of these patients. But the pain of the endometriosis will not go till you go and do the needling of these muscles. And once that is gone, the endometriosis itself is under control, so they never get a recurrence of pain.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yeah? Okay. Some of the offline people were asking me, this endometriosis pain is cyclical or what is its character? In the beginning, it is cyclical and premenstrual, but later there are patients who are in continuous pain, which worsens very much during the periods. So these patients, you have to, when you start treating like this, they respond. Initially, when you treat them, the continuous pain is the first one to go, and the cyclical pain becomes very mild, and later even the cyclical pain goes away. Usually they take about 8 to 10 sittings, not more than that. In fact, I have an audio testimonial of one such patient. I don't know if I can locate it, I'll play it sometime. Once again, endometriosis patients don't get referred to me, unfortunately. They have just come to me like that. Somebody's relative, somebody, they have been referred like that and they have come. In fact, I would very much love to do a study of endometriosis pain and even dysmenorrhea pain. These are areas of future study. And these are, they have no treatment anyway, any other way. So it would be beneficial to do this. That person's question is not coming through, I think.
So she's asking, how long pain relief is there after after DN in IBS?
The IBS pain which goes down due to DN will persist easily for 6 to 8 months. And after that, maybe because of the IBS, the trigger for the IBS, which is mainly in the mind, if you ask me. When I say in the mind, I'm not saying that the patients are imagining it. It is just that their nervous system is designed in such a way that they are so nervous, they get so hyper, they get so worried. And gut is the reflection of all their agitation. So after we do this, they are quiet for about 6-8 months or even a year, and then slowly the symptoms do recover. So we'll have to get them back and do this, or you have to give them psychotherapy and explain to them that they need to calm down. Meditation or mindfulness as a maintenance therapy they should do.
Okay. I think we can proceed with the video demonstration of the lower limb anatomy now.
This is a dissected specimen
वॉल्यूम बढ़ाना पड़ेगा.
of the anterior compartment of the thigh. We can see that the upper border is formed by the inguinal ligament and lower border is at the knee at the insertion of the quadratus femoris muscles. So the muscles which are seen in the anterior compartment are the sartorius, which forms the lateral border of the femoral triangle. The sartorius takes its origin from the anterior superior iliac spine and gets inserted on the medial surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. It forms the lateral border of the femoral triangle. The medial border is formed by the medial border of the adductor longus muscle, and the base of the femoral triangle is formed by the inguinal ligament. Now, contents of the femoral triangle will be the femoral vein, femoral artery and the femoral nerve. The floor of the femoral triangle is formed from medial to lateral by the adductor longus muscle, the pectineus muscle and the iliopsoas muscle, which is placed below the femoral neurovascular bundle. The other muscles which are present in the anterior compartment are the quadriceps femoris. Now this quadriceps femoris is made up of 4 muscles. One is the rectus femoris. The superficial muscle in the middle is the rectus femoris. Once we reflect the rectus femoris, we see the vastus intermedius. On the lateral aspect of the vastus intermedius is the vastus lateralis. On the medial aspect is the vastus medialis. Now all these 3 muscles take origin from the femur itself, while the rectus femur.
See, I wanted you to appreciate the 2 layers. You can see so well that the vastus intermedius is in a deeper plane compared to the vastus lateralis, and this you can see very well, appreciate it very well in sonoanatomy.
Femoris, it takes origin from the hip bone. Stop.
So here in this video we have seen the muscles of the anterior compartment. By mistake in the initial part of the video I have mentioned the quadriceps femoris as quadratus femoris. Please pardon me for that mistake. While rest of the muscles you can see clearly over here. The structure which you see on the upper part, this thin paper-like structure is the iliotibial tract. So that has been reflected laterally. We had to cut it to show the insertion below. So this is the iliotibial tract, and the rest of the muscles are clearly seen over here in this video. We'll go to the next video, that is the medial compartment of the thigh.
In this video, we are going to see the medial compartment of the thigh. Now, the muscles in the medial compartment will be the three adductors and the gracilis. This muscle which we see over here is the adductor longus. Now, this takes origin from the anterior surface of the pubis and gets inserted on the linea aspera. Now, this is the adductor longus muscle. Once we reflect the adductor longus muscle laterally, the deeper muscle is the adductor brevis. Now, this muscle takes origin from the middle part of the ischiopubic ramus. Once you reflect the adductor brevis, the next muscle which we see deeper is the adductor magnus muscle. Now, the adductor magnus has a very wide origin. It takes origin from the ischiopubic ramus and from the ischial tuberosity. So, it has two heads. The ischial head forms a part of the hamstrings which goes to the posterior compartment. Now, this head which we see over here is from the ischiopubic ramus. It has a very wide insertion also, which comes right up to the adductor tubercle on the medial aspect of the femur. The next muscle which we see is the gracilis. You can see this muscle over here. It is very well developed in this individual, the gracilis. Now, this takes origin from the lower margin of the ischiopubic ramus and gets inserted along with the sartorius and the semitendinosus on the medial surface of the medial condyle of the tibia. Stop.
Do you want to talk any?
No, I think I have already spoken about the importance of adductor magnus in back pains. I have already spoken about the importance of adductor magnus in maintaining posture and stance and stability. So this is a very important muscle for back problems. It is also an important muscle in patients who have difficulty in walking because of central nervous system problems. Ataxias and other things. Doing this muscle will help in stabilizing these patients, and they may not be completely all right, but their walk sort of improves a little bit more and they become confident.
So we go to the next of the gluteal region.
In this video, we are going to see the muscles of the gluteal region. Once you reflect the skin, you come across the gluteus maximus muscle. So this muscle which we can see over here, the most superficial muscle is the gluteus maximus. It has a very wide origin. Once we reflect the gluteus maximus, we can see the gluteus medius muscle. Reflect the gluteus medius and we see this muscle, that is the gluteus minimus. Now the muscle which we can see over here is the piriformis. We can identify this with the help of the sciatic nerve which arises below the lower border of the piriformis muscle. Below the piriformis, we can see the obturator internus. This is the tendon of the obturator internus with the superior and the inferior gemellus. So these three muscles come out together from the lesser sciatic notch. that is the obturator internus, the superior gemellus and the inferior gemellus. Here we see is the quadratus femoris muscle. Now you can see it is a quadrate shaped muscle taking origin from the lateral aspect of the ischial tuberosity and getting inserted on the quadrate tubercle of the greater trochanter of the femur. This what we follow over here is the sciatic nerve.
See, as Rakhi showed you, the origin of gluteus is in two parts almost. One, the medial part from the sacrum, and the other part, the vertical part, the horizontal part which comes from the sacrum, and a vertical part which comes from the iliac crest. So when you are doing needling, both these components have to be addressed properly. You know, a needle which goes vertically into the horizontal part and a needle which goes from the sacrum towards the gluteus medius and minimus in a horizontal way. So you put a horizontal needle into the vertical part and a vertical needle into the horizontal part. This is usually, that's the way it gets addressed very well.
Okay. So we are seeing the posterior compartment of the left thigh. Here we can see the muscles which form the hamstrings. On the medial aspect, we see the semitendinosus and a semimembranosus muscles. This is the sciatic nerve which has been cut to reflect. What I am lifting up with the forceps is the semitendinosus muscle. The semitendinosus muscle takes origin along with the biceps femoris from the ischial tuberosity. Now you can see that these are the two muscles coming together, while the semitendinosus goes laterally, the medially, the bicep femoris comes laterally. Both of them taking origin from the ischial tuberosity. This is a sciatic nerve which is coming in the way. Okay, so these are forming the superolateral borders of the popliteal fossa, that is the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus on the medial aspect and the bicep femoris on the lateral aspect. So superomedial and the superolateral borders of the popliteal fossa. This is a sciatic nerve again. Yeah, ऊपर से काटा है नहीं nerve है. Yeah. No, sorry. This is a muscle that is a semimembranous. No. This is a semimembranosus muscle. Okay. And deeper over here, this part which you see over here is the short head of the bicep femoris muscle. This part which you see over here is the short head of the bicep femoris. So you can see both of them are coming and getting inserted on the head of the fibula over here, while the semitendinosus goes and gets inserted on the posterior aspect of the medial condyle of the tibia, and the tendinosus will go to the medial aspect of the medial condyle of the tibia to get inserted with the gracilis and the sartorius. So this is regarding the posterior compartment of the thigh, muscles of the posterior compartment of the thigh. We next go to the front of the leg. Any questions on this or anything you want to discuss? Okay. So we go to the front of the leg.
In this video, we are going to see the muscles of the anterior compartment of the leg. So this is the superior aspect of the anterior compartment and this is the inferior aspect. This is the shin of the tibia, which is bare without any attachment of muscles. Most of the muscles or all the muscles are attached on the lateral aspect. So we can see the first muscle, that is the tibialis anterior. So this is the tibialis anterior over here. The next muscle which we see is the flexor hallucis longus. You can see that the tendon extensor hallucis longus. So this is the tendon of the extensor hallucis longus which has been cut over here, and this is the extensor digitorum. So this is the extensor digitorum, and the next muscle which we see over here is the peroneus tertius. So these are the 4 muscles in the anterior compartment of the leg. All of them take origin from the lateral aspect of the tibia and from the fibula.
So these were the muscles of the front of the leg. Now we go to the next video which shows the muscles of the lateral compartment of the leg.
Now in this video we are going to see the lateral compartment of the leg. In the lateral compartment there are only 2 muscles, that is the peroneus longus and the peroneus brevis. We can see that both these muscles take origin from the lateral surface of the fibula, and they go behind the lateral malleolus and they are inserted in the tarsal bones. So here we see the peroneus longus which is superficially placed, and below it is the peroneus brevis which is placed in the deeper layer.
So this was all about the lateral compartment. Next we see is the posterior compartment of the back, of the posterior compartment of the
In
leg.
this video we are going to see the muscles of the posterior compartment of the leg. This is the superior aspect, that is the popliteal fossa, and this is the inferior aspect, that is the heel of the leg. Now the most superficial muscle which we see over here is the gastrocnemius. Now, as you can see, the gastrocnemius takes origin from 2 heads. This is the medial head and this is the lateral head. Now the gastrocnemius is cut over here. We reflect the gastrocnemius. What we see over here is the tendon of the plantaris muscle. You can see this tendon which lies between the gastrocnemius and the soleus. So this is the tendon of the plantaris muscle. We can see this muscle over here. This is the plantaris muscle. Once we reflect the plantaris, we can see the popliteus muscle forming the floor of the popliteal fossa. So you can see these are the fibers of the popliteus muscle. It takes origin from in the form of an intracapsular tendon, and these are the fibers of insertion on the posterior aspect of the tibia. As we come down, we will see the soleus. This is the soleus muscle. Now together with the gastrocnemius, the soleus gets inserted on the calcaneum, that is the posterior surface of the calcaneum, in the form of the tendo-achillis. You can see the tendon over here, that is the tendo-achillis. Now once we reflect this superficial layer of muscles, we come to the deeper layer. This deeper layer consists of 3 muscles. So from medial aspect, we see this muscle, that is the tibialis posterior. So this is the tibialis posterior muscle, goes on the inferior aspect of the sole to get inserted into the tarsal bones of the foot. The next muscle over here will be the flexor hallucis longus, and the other muscle over here will be the flexor digitorum longus. So these are the muscles of the posterior compartment of the leg. The tendons of the digitorum and the tendons of the hallucis, they cross over, and then the hallucis goes medially and the digitorum goes to the lateral aspect, to the digits.
Okay, so this was the video of the back of the leg. Sorry, there was a mistake again in this video. The muscles were labeled from medial to lateral as the tibialis posterior. The second muscle which is on the medial aspect from medial to lateral is the flexor digitorum, and lateral most is the flexor hallucis. Here it was labeled wrongly. The hallucis was mentioned as the middle muscle and the digitorum was mentioned as the lateral muscle. but the muscles are placed from medial to lateral as the tibialis posterior, then the digitorum, and then the hallucis. Then they cross over at the ankle, and the hallucis goes medially and the digitorum goes laterally. So these are the three muscles of the posterior compartment. Okay. Now we go to the last video, that is the dissection of the foot.
In this video, we are going to see the muscles of the sole. We have reflected the skin, and now we are reflecting the fibrofatty tissue. This layer which we are reflecting is the flexor digitorum brevis. You can see the tendons of the flexor digitorum brevis muscle. On the lateral aspect, we see the abductor digiti minimi muscle. On the medial aspect, we see the abductor hallucis brevis muscle. Deeper to this is this layer, which is the flexor digitorum longus and the quadrate plantae muscle. Once we reflect this, we come to the deeper layer where we see the flexor hallucis longus and the adductor hallucis. You can see the oblique head of adductor hallucis and the transverse head of the adductor hallucis. On the lateral side, we see the abductor digiti minimi, and on the medial side, we see the abductor hallucis brevis. Once we reflect the fascia over here, we come to the tendon, that is the peroneus longus tendon. Now, deepest layer below the adductors will be the plantar interossei, and deeper to that will be the dorsal interossei muscles of the foot.
So again, if you see the anatomy of the foot, you will come across all these layers. This was the first time we have done a video recording for the workshop, so there are a few mistakes in the audio recording. And here also I have by mistake labeled the last layer muscles as the abductors while they are the flexors. So if you go through the audio again, you will realize the mistake that I have done, and I have corrected that mistake over here. I am really very sorry for that. So again, thank you so much for the patient listening. These are the videos for the anatomy of the lower limb. And again, I would like to thank the Dean of D.Y. Patil Medical College and the HOD of the D.Y. Patil Medical College, and the students who helped me, Dr. Rishi and Dr. Keshvi, for the dissection and the video recording. Thank you for giving me this chance, every one of you, and Lakshmi ma'am for being so patient with me. Thank you very much.